Our first easy to set up toddler activity is so easy to set up that Stella does most of it herself. Now it is one of the messier activities on the list. Don't worry, they do get less messy as we go along, but it has been so beloved that we've been doing it multiple times a day for the past week or so. You'll need some towels nearby, a bowl of water, and a variety of items that can either sink or float, because that's what we're discovering, sink versus float. And I chose a clear bowl specifically for moments like this. And this one simple to set up activity encompasses a lot of different explorations. Obviously, we've got sensorial exploration by just playing with the water, but we've also got language opportunities. Whenever an item sinks, we call out sink. And whenever an item floats, we will say float. And so we're introducing this new language to our child. We can also experiment here. What happens if we take the animal that sank and put it on top of the star that floats? Or what if we put all these animals inside the cup that was floating? How many animals will it take for the cup to sink? What happens if we press down on a floating star? And you can adjust this to be appropriate for your child's development. We started this with Stella when she was much younger, when she was an infant. Some of you guys may actually remember the video I made on it. And I just gave her a much more shallow container and I actually physically held her so she wouldn't fall into the water, but she was still discovering those very early understandings of sink versus float. And for an older child, you can actually have them sort whether the item sank or floated. You can see I tried to actually introduce that concept to Stella here, but she was definitely sorting based on what the item is as opposed to whether it sank or floated. But regardless of that, she did walk away with that new understanding of the words sink and float. Now sticking with the messier but still very easy to set up activities for just a little longer here, if you remember this sponge transfer activity that I introduced a little while ago, this is the next level to that. Stella was definitely looking for an additional challenge with our water transfer activities, so I introduced this garlic press. Now this one is definitely safe for her to be using. I tested it myself to make sure my fingers didn't get pinched in here. But what you can do is either introduce this or any kind of handheld juicer that you have that does the similar motion. Have them put the little sponges in there and squeeze together to pour the water into the other bowl. So now we're working on that grasp to get the sponge out of the water bowl. We're working on a bit of one-to-one correspondence because we want to make sure that only one of those sponges fits into that little slot. We're also working on a lot of hand and arm strength to really squeeze it all together to get that water out. There's also incredible work on that sequencing skill. Knowing that they have to take out the sponge and not immediately squeeze it, but rather put it inside that garlic press or that juicer, and then not squeeze that immediately, but rather hover it over the bowl and then squeeze it. Seems like an easy task for us, but this is a lot of steps to keep track of. So if you're finding that your little one is getting a bit bored of all the water transfer activities that you do have available to them at this point, try introducing something like this into the mix. This was definitely a welcome change and a welcome challenge on Stella's part. Now given the current weather and season, I definitely couldn't skip an easy to set up activity that involves the snow. Now if your little one is comfortable going outside in all that extra clothing and actually playing with the snow outside, doing that out there is also wonderful. But on the days when it's too cold to even think about heading outside, bringing the snow inside makes for a lot of fun as well. We start off with just a simple language activity. I took out our Arctic Animals book and our Arctic Animal figurines, and I asked Stella to put in whatever animal I called out into the snow. If your child is younger, you can simply name the animal as they put them into the snow themselves. Or for an older child, have them call out what animal it is that they're putting in the snow. Now we've also obviously got more sensorial exploration here, a chance for some creative and open-ended play. Whatever we were creating over there is definitely some creativity. And then we did a little searching for the animals. Now again, depending on your child's age, if they're older, you can give them something like tongs or tweezers to pull out the animals. If the child is younger, you can hide the animals much less and just have them pull them out with their hands. And again, depending on their language development, you can either call out what animals for them to pull or simply name the animals as they pull them out, or ask the child to name the animals for you. I also ended up twisting the animals around, so Stella had to pull them out based on what their tail is, because this made it much more challenging considering that a lot of these animals have very similarly shaped tails. Now the missed opportunity here is actually not introducing a bowl of water for her to put the animals into instead of just having to shake them around to get all the snow off, because then she could see the snow just melt right off, which would also be a very interesting opportunity for her as well. I did end up bringing out the warm water just at moments after that, so we went ahead and just dumped some of the snow in there to see what happens with it. So if your little one isn't interested in the animal figurine aspect, you can simply show them what happens when you combine snow and warm water. This is a much more fascinating discovery than we take it to be. And for our final messy but easy to set up toddler activity, we're going to be making tracks. If your little one is anything like Stella, they might have noticed that they make little tracks or leaf footprints behind in the snow. This has been very fascinating fascinating for us. Now you can see in the back there, we failed to do this in the actual snow, so I ended up just giving her a piece of paper, having her dip the different animals in the paint, and then put them onto the paper. Because they were wet from the snow, it definitely made it more of a watercoloring experience, but it still got the point across. I went ahead and selected animals that had different kinds of feet or claws or hooves, so then she could really see that difference. So if you haven't discovered stamps with your child just yet, I think this is a great way to start that discovery first before investing in a stamp set. Now, a quick word of caution, I have heard that sometimes animals will stain if you leave the paint on them for too long, so I just went ahead and made sure to wash off any of the paint that we had on these animals immediately after we were done, and they were completely fine. And moving on into the less messy but still easy to set up toddler activities, we're sorting. And to make it more Valentine's Day themed, I selected white and red vase fillers for Stella to sort. If your child is not quite there yet with their color sorting abilities, you can actually make this into color matching by placing red paper and white paper on the bottom of the two little containers. Sorting is an incredibly important skill for them to practice at this age, and I think we can get a little bit caught up in using the same things over and over to sort, which can make the work a bit less appealing to our child. So I encourage you to get a little bit creative and see what else you can get around the house that you can help your child sort. Using something that's smaller like this, but it's not still dangerously small for them, also again encourages their pincer grasp. And you can see Stella actually started working out her own method of how to sort. Instead of actually grabbing them one by one, she started grabbing handfuls and putting the majority of the colors into the appropriate container and then taking out the one or two stranglers. Not only are we working fine motor skills and color recognition, this is a chance for some very creative problem solving. And I think like most kids, Stella's favorite part also seemed to be just resetting this activity. If your toddler has recently discovered a love for stickers, you can use those for some sorting and matching activities as well before they get permanently stuck somewhere. You can see this one is actually a pretty difficult one to match with because some of the stickers vary only a little bit in pattern, where some of them are just larger and smaller variations of each other. So this is a great way to challenge a child who is really good at matching at this point. Or you can also use these ones to sort. This container had a variety of sizes, so we were sorting the big ones and the small ones. And once we're all done with all the sorting and the matching activities, then we can go ahead and actually use them as stickers. Say you don't have something that's all that special for your toddler to be sorting. What about just sorting laundry? What about sorting some food in your house? It really doesn't need to be that complicated. Stella has been enamored with trying to figure out if some laundry pieces are hers, mom's, or dad's. So I set up some of our familiar faces cards and started giving her whatever items of clothing we had. And she had so much fun sorting out whatever is mom's and whatever is dad's. And she got to run around in that process. Here's an even simpler activity to set up. All you need is some paper and some crayons. If your child is verbal, think of what items you can draw that they can actually either say or sign or at least make the appropriate sound for. If they're not verbal yet, you can actually make some little cards or just small variations of those drawings to hand to your child so they can start matching them for you. And you'll go ahead and draw those items. You can see I actually took it a step further and I started drawing them only with geometric shapes because we've been discovering a lot of geometric shapes in the puzzles that we're working with. So now we're not only working on just charades and language, we're also working on those very first geometric shape recognition skills. If you've seen my video on creativity in the Montessori environment, you'll know that while a child is incredibly creative and we need to give them that space to express that creativity, they also need to see what is actually possible. Stella's interest and abilities at drawing increased dramatically when I simply showed her how mom draws. Now I do have a full video on art, music, and culture in the Montessori home coming shortly, so stick around for that, but you can explore color mixing quite easily with your child. If you have magnet tiles or any other see-through items that are colorful, or even silk scarves that are transparent enough to let the colored lights shine through, set it up in a way where the light will shine through and cast itself onto the floor or onto a wall. This concept is so cool for a child to see. They will notice that as they move the item around, the color might get brighter, it might get more dull, it might get bigger, or it might get smaller. You can also show your child that they can put their hand where that light is touching, and now their hand will have a different color on it, or they can put something like animals in it. As you rotate the different items around, as the light shines through the different colors, you'll see the colors start to mix together. So we're exploring some basic art theory here as well. Since this is such an open-ended activity, you can get very creative with it. We've been doing this for several weeks at this point, and Stella has yet to lose interest in it. Now, if you invite your child to also add some other items into the mix, like their animal figurines, they might notice that they cast a shadow. Not only are they getting colored by the different magnet tiles, they're also casting their own shadow. And that becomes a really cool concept to explore as well. They again will notice that depending on how they move their different animals around, the shadow will change. They might also notice that if they move the animals inside the colored plastic, they will have a color on them, and then if they move them outside, they might not have a shadow at all. And they might notice that if they stand in the way of the sun, they will be blocking the shadow and creating one big shadow from them. Again, these are things that are so incredibly simple to us as adults, but they're really fascinating for a child. And as a little bonus here, we've really enjoyed making this kind of stained glass effect for not only us, but also our animal figurines to enjoy here. Another incredibly simple activity to set up that relates to art is making a mural. So bringing the art activity down to the floor, making it quite large. This star isn't quite as big as I hoped it would be, but that's as big as I could get it. I've also taped together a bunch of bags before to make one giant mural on the floor. I'm using very washable crayons, and I'm also doing this on the part of the floor that's also incredibly washable. So even if we do stray away from the paper, we don't really have a risk of damaging anything. But simply changing the location, changing the size or the shape of the paper, making it as large as the child, that makes this activity that they might have gotten bored of that much more interesting again. It brings new life into this very simple activity. And again, as always, we can use this as a chance to introduce language as we start naming all the different colors that we're using. And then we can go ahead and incorporate those same stickers that we were sorting and matching before. I went ahead and peeled back the backing of the sticker, so then Stella had an easier time grabbing it and peeling it off, because again, we're working that little pincer grasp. And again, even the simple act of placing stickers onto their mural is a language opportunity. We can ask them what color they're going to place, where they're going to place it, or simply ask them what it is that they're placing onto their mural, which is stickers. Or we can sportscast or narrate it for them if the child isn't able to say it back to us just yet. And sticking with the creative arts for just a tad longer, we're making a sensorial material. We're going to make sound cylinders. You can see here I actually created 2 sets and Stella has to match them. For a younger child, you can simply remove the construction paper and make just 1 set and allow the child to see the different items inside the jars, how they're moving around, and hear the different sounds that they're making. As the child gets older, you can have them simply match 2 different sets, but again, leave the construction paper off. At this point, I went ahead and added the construction paper, and on the bottom, I added colored stickers, which will serve as our control of error. When I presented this to Stella, I lined up the 1 set in front of her, and I encouraged her to take one of the bottles, shake them around, and take whatever is on the tray and see if it's a match. And when we would flip the bottles over, we could see if the stickers are the same color or if they're 2 different colors. You can see it took some time for her to actually figure out that the best way to approach this for her would be to take both of the jars in her hands and shake them at the same time. This is the most advanced version of this activity, so it is quite difficult, but she was so incredibly proud when she finally figured out her own little method to doing this and started making the matches time and time again. So yes, this is a sensory motor exploration, but it's also a lot of problem solving. She's really refining that sense of hearing and trying to understand what is inside each of the jars. If you've got an older child, you can actually encourage them to try to guess what's in there. Maybe give them some options or just see if they can guess what it is that's inside the jars making these sounds. And if you need some ideas, in ours I just put some of those same vase fillers, I put jingle bells, I put some dried macaroni, and some dried oatmeal. So all of them are making quite distinctly different sounds. Now if you're going to leave this on your child's shelf, go ahead and separate the 2 sets out. You can see I put one of the sets in the shoebox, so that way she could just reach over to the one side and the other side and start making a match. Now a couple of simple gross motor activities to set up. We were trying to do some floor hockey. Stella's been really interested in her broom, but she can't aim it just yet, so I decided we would try aiming at all the different balls that we've got. This quickly actually turned into a soccer match as she tossed aside the broom and the Swiffer and decided she's going to just kick the balls around. We tend to get caught up in using the balls as a way to redirect a child from throwing, but they can also be used to develop some other gross motor skills as well, especially something like kicking the ball around where the child has to at least momentarily balance on their one leg. It's a great way for them to develop that skill as well. Not to mention, it's a great chance for them to develop that coordination that some of us, myself included, lack as adults. Now, if you're not new to my channel, you know I'm always trying to combine our nugget with some kind of animal matching activity. I find that Stella has a lot more interest in actually working on her gross motor skills if there's some kind of activity that has a purpose connected to it. If your child is the opposite, where they never seem to sit still and you can't get them to concentrate on an activity, this may be a good alternative to that as well. Now, obviously, you don't need the actual nugget in order to set this up. You can use whatever you have around the house to make a little course that is going to be developmentally appropriate for your child. Stella's been very interested in working on balancing, so we've got this little balancing beam, and I made a way for her to climb up to our couch. She brought the animal all the way over to the end and had to match it to the card at the top. You could use something as simple as some masking tape to create a line for your child to balance on. You can use chairs, you can use pillows. If you've got the pickler triangle or the balance board, you can use any of those items in combination to create some kind of fun, different, challenging courses for your child to explore, and also combine it with any kind of activity that they're currently interested in. I tend to gravitate towards some kind of matching activity because it's, again, just that extra chance for us to explore some additional language opportunities. Now here's an example of a way you don't have to incorporate any other activity into this. We set up our little balance beam. We're going to climb under this little fort that I made. Now because Stella doesn't jump just yet, I had her just climb on the little ledge, and then we were going to throw these beanbags from here all the way into her wagon, but we've got some very creative problem solving, and instead of throwing, we just brought everything over and dumped it into the little wagon instead. This is a different idea that you could utilize as well. If you've got a little that's very into animals and they've mastered all of the different animal matching activities you've got for them, how about exploring the different parts of a certain animal? This one you can again make as complex or as simple as is appropriate for your child. You can see I picked out some of the big body parts, but you can make this as simple as head, back, and legs. Or you can get a lot more intricate and a lot more complex. This is great because you can adjust it to be whatever animal your child is into. Stella is obsessed with her little rhino, so that's what we've got here. By simply printing the same picture twice and then cutting out certain portions of the picture, we set up a very simple language and zoology activity. So I hope you've gotten at least one or two easy to set up toddler activity ideas from this. And until next time, I hope you stay safe.